Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is going to be for Sun by Lois Lowry. This is the fourth book in the Giver Quartet. I don't have the books individually, so we'll just have to look at the Giver Quartet unless I decide to put a picture up here, which I might do. But anyways, so this is the fourth book in the Giver Quartet. This is really the only genre that I can put it into is dystopian fantasy. Yeah, it's kind of the only genre that it really fits into, which is kind of surprising because most books have several subgenres that they fit into pretty easily. But this is kind of an interesting book as it is, and yeah, we'll get into my review here. So Sun is the fourth and final book in the Giver Quartet, which is I already mentioned. This is a series of novels set in a dystopian future, and the first three books in the series are The Giver, Gathering Blue, and Messenger. These books that I've read since I started the channel, but I haven't done a review on them, and I don't know when I will or if I ever will, because I need to reread them all. I technically reread The Giver recently enough, but I don't want to do that. I'm just going to start with Sun, and then maybe eventually when I go through and reread them all, I'll do a series review or a individual book review or something. I don't know what I'll do, but that'll come up later. Anyways, before I get into the rest of this review though, I just quickly like to say if you're liking what you're seeing from an Erudite adventure, we'd really appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. This has been a book that I needed to read for several years. I first read The Giver in my early teens, I don't know, 2013, 2014, something like that. And since then I've reread The Giver, I don't know, 3-4 times maybe, including the one this year before I read Sun. And then in 2020, the first year that we started the channel, I reread The Giver, and then I read Gathering Blue and I read Messenger with the intent of then continuing on and finishing the series by reading Sun fairly soonly after that. That quickly turned into 3 years, and so I just got to this actually. I mean, it's been 5 months now, something like that, 4 or 5 months now since from the time of filming this to the time that I actually read the book, and that's confusing. My words aren't flowing correctly. That's alright, I will continue tending to read more off my script than trying to say my own things, because that way it can stay clear, hopefully. Okay, so I read this in March, and I think it was probably sometime in March or maybe in February, I don't remember exactly what, but I was talking to Derek Bailey, who's the author of Digitarum, which is a book that I've reviewed, and then he's also the author of the Voidwalker collection, which I haven't read yet, and his newest book is Umbrage, which I haven't read yet either, but he is an author, a self-published author. I've talked to him a little bit now, and he mentioned that he needed to read Sun, and I was like, oh, I need to read it too, and so we ended up buddy reading it, which led to a lot of really good discussion, most of which will not end up getting included in this review at all, just because there was a lot of it. There was a lot of variety of topics that we went into, and a lot of things that aren't pertinent to a review, but a discussion would be really beneficial to getting all our thoughts out, probably. So I have quite a few mixed opinions of this series, and especially of this final book. The Giver is a book that I will always consider to be a favorite. It's one that I read it at the right time in my life. I was the right age, I was the same age as the kids, all that kind of thing, where it's designed to be read at a certain age and to impact the reader if they read it at the right time. And it very much so did that for me, and it's one that The Giver is one that I've long considered to be a favorite and probably always will. I then read Messenger, like I mentioned, in 2020, and I enjoyed Messenger, I think, more than I enjoyed The Giver, or appreciated it at least for different aspects. Different parts of the story meant more to me than The Giver did. But then I read Messenger, and Messenger really changed my opinions on the series. It really made me recontextualize everything that was going on, and I still don't know how I feel about Messenger, if I like that book or not. Then I read Sun, and Sun is the fourth and final book, and it does some things. Sun is a very different book than either of the previous three, but at the same time it does some things very similarly, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. This Sun actually kind of tells three different stories. It's split into 3 parts, or I don't know if they're parts or if they're called books. But whatever the case is, there's 3 different sections of Sun, each one of them kind of telling its own story with a beginning, middle, and end, and then obviously they all tie together for this greater narrative, but it's kind of 3 distinct sections of the story. or 3 different stories, if you want to call it that. The first one feels very much like The Giver for a lot of reasons, including the fact that it's the same timeline as The Giver, and it takes place in the same place as The Giver. So for those 2 reasons specifically, it feels very much like The Giver. The second half, or the second part, is very different from The Giver, but it reminded me a lot of Gathering Blue in many ways, and then the third part reminded me a lot of Messenger in many ways. And so each part kind of mirrors or parallels one of the other previous books in the series, and it's a really cool way that the book was written, and I think it was done fairly well, actually. The thing about this book is that I was left feeling unsure of what I thought about the book. Largely positive, but still with some mixed opinions on certain aspects. The first 2 parts of the book followed a character named Claire, and I actually really enjoyed both of these parts. But then the third book starts to follow a character named Gabe, as well as some other perspectives, POVs, and it really kind of changes the way, again, it makes you recontextualize the rest of the books prior to this, to the rest of the story prior to this point. And again, this third part is the part that I question my feelings, my opinions, my thoughts on the most, and they're really pretty mixed, my opinions are. On the one hand, the exploration and the questions in this section are really interesting, but on the other hand, I run into the same problem that I had with Messenger, and that is the magic. I love fantasy, I love magic, but I don't know that it works in this series. It's so weird because this series, the first book, I would never, not once say, oh, this is magic. Book 2, Gathering Blue, I'd be like, oh, you could maybe call this magic, but it's really not still. And then book 3 is like, no, this is straight up hard magic. And even that is not actually completely accurate, but there's a very distinct feel from it. And then it comes into this book again, and it again goes back and recontextualizes it, or it goes back and does basically the same thing as what happened in Messenger, where I had to go back and recontextualize everything that happened. But there's a lot of metaphysical things that happen in this book, and as interesting as that was in many ways, and as well written as it was, because it's undeniably well written, I don't really know that it worked with the world, and that's the struggle that I'm still having. It's why I'm still, I guess, let's see, I read this in March, and it's July, so it's only 3 months by that standard. It's basically the end of July, so 4 months. We're just going to say 4 months. I'm still 4 months later trying to puzzle out whether or not I actually liked this book, whether or not I thought that the story... No, that's not the issue. I thought the story being told was a good story to tell and was a necessary story to tell, but I don't know that I liked it. I don't know that I enjoyed the way that it was told, and that's interesting to me, because normally I go into a book and I read the book for what it is, and I enjoy it for what it is, not for what I wanted it to be or what I thought it would be. And in this book, I can't quite reconcile how my brain is supposed to think about this book, and the fact that, did I actually like the book or did I not? I don't know. It's really confusing to me in many ways, but it's a good book because it has made me think, and I have thought a lot about this book since I finished. I will say I was reminded a lot of Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes during the finale of this book specifically. The way it ended and how things happened, it felt very similar, and I suspect possibly purposefully so, to the events in the ending of Something Wicked This Way Comes. To me, one of the major themes of this book, and this was actually Derek mentioned it or brought it out, and I was like, oh yeah, I absolutely see that now, and I agree fully. I just hadn't put it into those words until he did. This theme is temptation. There's really no way to avoid temptation, but there are ways to overcome temptation, and that's kind of a major theme of this final book, and that's a theme that I really appreciate and really like. So while there's a lot for me to like and appreciate in this book, there's still some things that I'm unsure about. Books 2 through 4 definitely really feel connected, but The Giver still feels a little bit like its own thing to me, and I kind of like that it's its own thing, but at the same time I kind of wish that the whole series really felt like it tied together and was a series. I definitely have more positive than negative feelings regarding this book though, and the series as a whole. I will say there were a couple things that I noticed as I was reading through The Giver, or as I was reading through Sun, and the section that takes place during the events of The Giver, where the things don't quite line up perfectly. It's almost like the author remembered how they happened and didn't go and check how they happened, and then her memory was just either she wanted to change the way that it actually happened, or she just forgot how exactly it had happened, and so there was a few things that didn't quite line up perfectly in the way that that the two stories were told. But overall, there weren't enough of them for me to be like, oh, this is a completely different story or anything like that. It's just there were some things that I noticed that didn't quite match up perfectly. So anyways, that is my review for Sun by Lois Lowry. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.